I stepped onto the platform and took in the long line of sleek blue train carriages with a clean white stripe down the sides. Being here was bittersweet. On the one hand, I'd never expected to actually make it to my dream holiday. On the other, I'd only pulled the trigger on such an extravagant expense to get me as far away as possible from the man I loved. After all these years, I never expected the final straw would be something as benign as a fancy dress fundraiser, but it was. As I'd helped him with his costume that night, a simple white tank top and baseball cap wig, Iggy had vibrated with excitement. He'd chosen it to create a stir, and as usual, once Iggy fixed his heart on something, nothing on the earth would shake him. He'd considered that night's costume his funniest, sexiest idea to date. But as I stepped close to apply the large "No Regrets" tattoo to Iggy's waxed upper chest and prepared to watch him walk out the door without me once again, I began to feel the deep, soul-crushing irony of the tattoo's message. Had I stepped forward another few inches, the tip of my nose would have fit perfectly into the dip between his collarbone, smelling his Joe Malone whiskey and cedarwood cologne, and feeling the warm comfort of his skin against mine. I'd imagined it so often in recent years that it felt familiar. Right. Even though it was impossible. When I'd come to work for the Corbridge family, I'd never imagined feeling this way. Back then, my charge had been a teen boy who was more legs than sense and had a mouth 10 times bigger than he was. I'd felt more like a babysitter than a valet, a 6-year veteran of the British Army, tasked to keep the Chancellor of the Exchequer's son from getting into trouble. Thanks to meeting an actual royal valet while there, the indomitable Arthur, I'd done my job well. 8 years later, I'd brought Iggy home safely with an Ivy League college degree as well. I'd assumed Iggy would let me go then, no matter how fond we'd grown of each other, but I'd been pleasantly surprised. He'd made me his valet and social secretary, entrusting me with everything related to his personal life, his house, his wardrobe, and his calendar. Moreover, he'd made me his friend, sharing with me a decade's worth of dreams and aspirations, endless sexual conquests and near misses, and all the failures and triumphs of the work he'd chosen to do. Ignatius Corbridge was passionate about being out. He was loud and proud about his bisexuality, and did his best to make sure others could do the same by lobbying European governments and advocating for global victims of hate crimes. With his high-level political connections, Iggy had become a force to be reckoned with. In short order, the rebellious teenager I'd been fond of had become a determined, witty, kind, joyful man I needed like oxygen. I'd fallen deeply in love with him, despite our age difference, despite being his employee. And I'd treasured every moment in his company so damn much that I'd thought, "This is enough, John. If you only get to love him this way, you can be satisfied." Which only made it harder to witness what happened next. I couldn't point to the time when his partying lifestyle became changing.